Fantastic. Thank you, Celine. And I'm very happy and honored to be able to talk to the Book Arts Guild and let them know about our current rather large and wild endeavors at the International Printing Museum. And I love going through the list of all who's participating in there. I probably know about half of you, and on the half that I know, they're all over the country, and this is my way of saying hello to all of you. And so from the International Printing Museum, right now I'm not actually at the museum. I'm at my off-site museum, which would be my 3-car detached garage with the 4 Coins press here behind me, and not enough room and space for all the toys that I'd like to play with. But as you'll see in what I'm about to share with you, this addiction for heavy metal can overwhelm your life and your space and all. So this is a tale of 2 typographic treasures that I've been involved with in saving. One that I was planning on or working towards for literally 2 decades, and the other just sort of approached itself on me. And if you're not familiar with the International Printing Museum, we were established in 1988. The collection is mostly one guy's private collection, a guy by the name of Ernie Lindner, who built this collection over the course of 50 years of his life. A very, very large, one of the largest collections of antique printing equipment in the country, certainly on the world stage as well. We started the museum in '88, and I came in to help create it as a museum. And these other collections here are being obviously added to the museum. And Ernie himself was a voracious collector, finding machines all over the country, if not over Europe and the world. Usually those in Europe in the 60s and 70s didn't know his name. They just knew that there was a crazy American willing to take your cast iron away for you. And eventually he built up a rather significant collection of these machines, one of which is the Albion press right here behind me from 1832. And so sometime here in 2021, we got a call from somebody at the Smithsonian, and they called asking if we would be interested in a collection of matrices. And I realize I'm also talking to both people that know all the terms of what I'm talking about, and those that might kind of know but not have a full knowledge on it. So allow me to give details about what some of the stuff is so you guys have some context. So they called basically saying that we have this collection of Linotype matrices for a typesetting and casting system known as the Linotype. And the Linotype itself, I can show you guys a visual. This is my way of doing Zoom. It looks really good. So there's a Linotype there. So you've got the keyboard and you type whatever it is you want to spell lines of type out. And the machine itself will then assemble brass matrices, very rectangular in shape. And if you can barely see on there, there's an indented character. You get a whole line of these together. It squirts molten metal at 550 degrees, and it then casts a line of type ready to go into a printing press, the letterpress printing process. So these matrices, the Smithsonian has the Linotype collection that came from Linotype itself. It was their library, meaning Linotype kept one font of everything that they made. And you as a customer over the years, while Linotype was in business, could access that font with special permission. And you had to send in a letter, and it went to a certain person who we'll talk about in a moment by the name of Frank Romano, who worked at Linotype. And he would take it to the president, and the president would sign off whether or not you were allowed to use these special matrices. but they kept a backup of everything that they made. They called asking if I'd be interested. And I said, yes, we would definitely be interested, because they were deciding to get rid of it. We have linotypes, we have matrices. We certainly want to make sure that these get saved. The challenge was the fact that as I asked what the quantity was, it was 10,000 fonts. Now, one little piece of brass isn't so heavy, but you multiply that by, 10 characters, 10 for each character, and it starts becoming a lot of weight. And then I also asked him, I said, well, if you're getting rid of that, what else are you getting? Well, we're talking to some other museums and other institutions on stuff on our type collection. As I found out, the other institution that they were talking to was the Museum of Printing that's up in Haverhill, Massachusetts. Another wonderful collection, which happens to be managed. The president of that is Frank Romano, whose background is the history of type himself. Frank has been involved in the printing industry since the 50s and has created many publications on it. He's written articles and books, and he is the printing industry. And so he's currently in his retirement years at the age of 80, 81, has been the president of that museum up there. So as it turns out, he was involved in this. As we came closer to having to talk with the Smithsonian and figure out what they were doing, Frank and I, it turns out that they were also getting rid of two other collections. So the first is the Linotype collection of 10,000 fonts of matrices, brass matrices. The second was the ATF, which is American Type Founders matrices, and it's a total of about 5,000 matrices. These matrices, for a different casting system, American Type Founders, which was an amalgamation of all the other surviving type foundries back at the end of the 19th century, they cast individual type that you would use in your presses. So individual type meaning individual characters with a raised letter, and then you assemble it as a page and then print from it. Well, ATF up through the late 1980s was still in business, and this was their archive of matrices. Not everything that the Smithsonian was offering, but as it turns out, but they had 5,000 unique fonts of matrices. That certainly was of interest, and my hand went up on that one of interest. The third part of the collection was something known as the Morgan Press Type Collection there at the Smithsonian. And if you're not familiar with this, Morgan Press, Lloyd and Willard Morgan out of New York, in New York City, they had a typesetting service but they also collected vintage type, wood type, metal type into the 19th century, and had probably one of the at the time, certainly one of the largest collections of 19th century type. And they, as a service, you could order a proof of type in a headline of your choice, which you can then go into the offset printing process with. But they would use the original type and proof something for you. Well, this collection was so enormous and valuable as well. In 1980, 1981, the Smithsonian arranged for the acquisition of that collection. I'm not exactly sure of the exact amount, but I think it was probably close to $400,000. And they acquired that collection, which was probably 3,000 or 4,000 fonts of metal type and probably about 1,000 fonts of wood type. So both Frank and I, were obviously very interested in that collection. Frank was at the table first, so he was offered the Morgan Type Collection. We arranged to go down there in December of 2021. We met there at the Smithsonian, and when we went into the warehouse, the offsite warehouse space, and I'm going to show you some pictures of all this, but this is in Suitland, Maryland, and it is, I like to refer to it as, if you remember Indiana Jones in the first movie and the final scene where Indiana is sitting there with a government bureaucrat asking where the Ark is. And he says, "Where is the Ark?" And the response back by the government bureaucrat was, "It's in a safe place." No, where is it? It's in a safe place. And then they cut away to a warehouse with all these crates and things. That's the Smithsonian warehouse that we're talking about in Suitland, where these treasures were there. I like to think not far from the Ark of the Covenant. So we arranged to go down there and view the collection. And as we got there and we walked through, it became apparent. We were asking, so, all right, well, here's all the type, and the type was originally for the Morgan collection. He had his type in cases, type cases that the printers typically keep it in. He had it in random boxes. One of the things that the printers love, the collectors love to put them in, was cigar boxes. So here's one of those collections of cigar boxes. So you'd have the name of the type there, and you put it up on its side, and you store your type. Well, all the type was already pretty much out of those boxes and now on galleys, metal trays that the printers use. And we kept looking around, and neither one of us saw the wood type, which obviously is a major part of that collection. As we asked the question, it became very clear that, oh, the wood type is not part of the offering of what we're getting rid of. It's only the metal type, and only the metal type in this particular building. They were intending on tearing down all of these structures and building a new Smithsonian storage facility in this offsite location. So for both of us, it was like there's a major alarm in that they were now separating this important historical national collection, the Morgan Press Type Collection, and whatever was out of Building 18, as the name of the building we were in, a Quonset hut. This is an old military barracks and facility. Whatever made it over to the other building, that is being saved. Whatever's left in this building for the last 20 years, they're getting rid of, because the bureaucrats high up in the food chain at the Smithsonian decided we're done with everything in this building, and whatever didn't get out, we're getting rid of. So Frank and I talked about that. We tried to appeal to them to keep that collection together, because both of us view that as a national printing heritage typographic collection, and it should be together. But they were not going to spend any effort and any money to save that collection. What was left in Building 18. So Frank, after some appeals on that, he pulled out, and then my arm went up and said, well, I'll take that for the printing museum. And what a gem, that collection of metal type that was still in the building. They did get some of the metal type out of the building and made it into, I believe it was Building 24, which you'll see in the slideshow I'm about to show you. So what is still there, entombed in Building 24, is still remaining there. And whatever is there in Building 18, we are going to be removing and saving. But I'm young, and so there's still hope to get the other treasures out of the hands of the bureaucrats. So So that's that collection there at Smithsonian. I'm going to show you the slideshow in just a second here, but I just want to give you a preview of the second part of the presentation, which is the collection, Dave Peat Typographic Collection in Indianapolis. Some of you in the audience here both knew Dave or have known of Dave. Dave was the most iconic collector of typographic 19th century and early 20th century typographic printing material that I've ever known, and I think that anybody in this audience would have known. He was the collector's collector, indefatigable. He pursued his collection with such energy and was very aggressive on what you did not want to be against Dave bidding on a font of type or a small printing press on eBay. You would lose. Dave will get it. And I have known Dave for 30 years and all. And for the last 20 years, we've been working with Dave, talking and communicating about trying to preserve his collection as a whole, because nobody can ever replicate what Dave had created. Dave's collection was very much on par, by the time he was finished, was on par with the Morgan Press collection. And then when Dave passed away on December 25th, 2020, we then began a communication with the family about acquiring the collection and keeping it together and preserving Dave's legacy and making that legacy available to those that can both appreciate it both visually and physically, because that's what Dave was about, using his collection. He was certainly about acquiring his collection, but he certainly wanted to see that it was used, and he used his collection throughout his life. So we'll chat about Dave's collection after I talk about the Smithsonian collection. So what I'm going to do right now, if my technology and my mastering of technology allows me, I'm going to share my screen and go through a series of slides and be trying to talk through the experience there at the Smithsonian on that part of the project. Keep in mind that the Smithsonian material itself represents about 30 to 35 tons of material. You should always be careful when you put your hand up in acquiring 30 to 35 tons of material. So let's see, I'm going to give a shot here at sharing the screen. So that first picture, just so you know, that is Frank Romano at the Museum of Printing up there in Haverhill. If you're up in the Northeast, you're ever traveling up there, absolutely you want to go over and see that. One of the great collections of printing material and all. So there we are outside of the Smithsonian's offsite storage space. The storage itself, the challenges over the years was the fact that they put all this stuff into this offsite storage space and then found out after the fact that it was filled with asbestos. Well, the asbestos was in the ceilings and everything else. So at some point, the curators, even they began to lose access to the space. You had to be in a full bunny suit to go in there and do any of the work. They did a remediation process on all of the asbestos. The volunteers, one of the curators there was Stan Nelson, a good friend of mine, also a member of the APA. Well, he essentially spent his entire career managing and working with this collection, as well as Jim Walczak, who had organized the type and all that. If you notice here in the picture, all of the plastic tarping, everything was covered in plastic and duct taped. They had bought the nation's supply of duct tape to tape all of this and seal it. When I asked them what they were concerned about, Steve, the manager of the facility, who had worked with Stan over the years as well, said, well, you know, of course it's lead dust. And I said, oh, okay. And they said, yeah, and lead vapors, which that on its face is just the most hilarious statement to be made, that somehow vapors were coming off of the printer's type and off of the brass matrices. Because when I asked them that question, I was standing in front of the Linotype brass matrices. So these matrices are emitting vapors. And so there we go. So it took a couple hours just to get all of the plastic off of all that. There's Steve, real nice gentleman. He's been managing all this. These cabinets themselves were from American Type Founders, the ATF cabinets. These are the original cabinets, and they were probably built by Hamilton Manufacturing there in Two Rivers, Wisconsin, who also made wood type, and they made the cabinetry. These all had thin drawers that would hold each of the fonts of matrices. They had, over the years, taken everything out of those drawers and put them onto their own custom sheet metal galley trays, which of course don't fit in any other galley cabinet. But all of those cabinets, which we're going to try and save as many of those as we can. And the other side of the warehouse is the stacks of the drawers that they came out of. So the matrices, as you can see, large, small. So there's the logos for ATF, American Type Founders. And there's so much beauty in all of these pieces. And these are just the matrices, not the actual type, and some of these things have never been seen before. In the middle of the screen, you can see upside down there, BB&S type. Barnhart Brothers and Spindler out of Chicago. And that's a 2-color set of matrices there. Well, that's not in any catalog. Our team had a great team of volunteers that came down to do a project like this. Is sort of like you get inspired by Mark Twain and Tom Sawyer sitting next to a fence, dreaming of it becoming white. And I would talk about this project in a way of, and everybody would ask, well, can I come? Can I come and help paint that fence? I said, no, it's a lot of work. And I was, oh, please, can I come? So there pictured on the left is Ian Edelson, who I believe is in the audience here tonight. He lives there in DC, and great man of both printing and logistics. He's the kind of guy, when you talk about how to move stuff, that's his business. He knows that. And on the right there is Lloyd Bocott, which you up in the Pacific Northwest would know him. So Lloyd is up there in British Columbia and manages Printers Northwest on Facebook and stuff. So he's a good friend of the museum. So they came down and schlepped away. We did this. We've spent a couple of weeks already down there. And this becomes one of the challenges of all the type was taken out of the original boxes and cigar boxes and carefully placed on all these galleys. There's probably about 20 of these cabinets with 100 galleys each. And we were trying to consolidate them. But as you pull out these galleys of the Morgan type, and it's just stunning the fonts and stuff that you've never seen before. And somebody would pull out a galley like this, and you'd hear this, and somebody would lose their breath as they looked at something totally amazing. And everybody would rush over, all the volunteers would rush over to look at it, and we'd all stare at it. And then we'd walk away, and hoping that someday we would see that again. Fortunately, they had proofed most of the type. I mean, you look at that. I mean, that's sexy and gorgeous. Those of us who are into 19th century type, and was like, wow, and I had never seen this one before. Fortunately, they created proofs of this so that it'll make it easy for us to sort and do it. So you can see the galleys all around. Fonts of matrices. And of course, ATF would make those kind of special matrices for companies like the New York Times. Moving a lot of heavy material. So we had to pull all the galleys out, empty the cabinets, put the cabinets onto pallets, repack them with galleys, move the type. Every galley sort of had one font, so we would consolidate 2 or 3 fonts on a galley. That right there, the weight of that alone is probably 3,000 pounds, 2,000 to 3,000 pounds. Other parts of our team there on the left, Sharon and Jerry Grant. On the right there, Joanne. All of those trays are the uniquely made trays to take the fonts from ATF and put them onto those trays. And they had their own storage system for that. So we had to wrap everything up. But all of these are this particular group here is the posse for somebody by the name of John Barrett, Letterpress Things, up in Western Massachusetts. So they're his crew that helps him on Tuesdays, and they got very excited about coming down. And we rented a house a mile away from the storage place and worked all day and enjoyed the company all night. There's John Barrett, Letterpress Things. And that was a railroad logo. How do you keep working when you see such beautiful stuff? I had to keep whipping the crowd. And look at these. Oh, that's unheard of. What's going to be absolutely amazing is that we're going to work on recasting some of this type, make it available again. Every once in a while, something falls. And then we have to go pick that up. They actually took this home. I think it was Sharon's way of taking that type home so she can use it a little bit and then sort it and send it back. And then we would find in the middle of something, like this was an original letter from American Type Founders, and it was talking about received from this individual these punches for making a certain type, 1898. And you got that kind of historical documentation inside of all this. There's Val Lucas out of Maryland. And she is actually a burgeoning type founder. So she knows how to cast this type. So she's going to be part of our team that we start to recast the type here. So as a typecaster, she was going nuts about all the potentials and opportunity here. And she's the one who discovered that letter from ATF. On the cabinetry itself, when we turned it over, just historically, just having that kind of documentation, American type founders. And that particular cabinet, because they merged Barnhart Brothers and Spindler, BB&S, 1930. You can see one of the small, thin drawers. What you're looking at here is the Linotype collection. Each one of these cabinets, the blue cabinets and the brown ones above, was an entire tray filled with brass matrices. And it was completely double stacked in this entire area. That meant that we had to take out each one of the drawers that weighed 70, 80, 100 pounds, and then pull it down, take the cabinet down, which was heavy steel, and then restack it single high on pallets. Something you should definitely notice is the age of my crew. Working very hard. I think the average age was 65 to 70 years of age. And we did more work in 5 days that this crew was down there. And the Smithsonian crew just was blown away by how much we had packed and prepared this material, which they did not want to touch at all. There's the trays. We had to figure out how to slide these off, get them down. So there's our crew. From the left, Jerry, Sharon, Val, John, Mark, and Joanne. And we had done a pretty good job of getting this all ready. Every one of the trays had to be wrapped individually. And that's our location there offsite. We managed to get a great Airbnb, and we got to talk and chat and talk about printing and recount all the treasures of the day. Some samples of some of the material. Something we have to deal with is this duct tape over all the cabinets and everything that's been on there for 20, 25 years. What a wonderful box. They did manage to leave a few fonts of wood type that they did not get out. Almost all the wood type was already in building 24, but it was nice to see that they left a few fonts. I wasn't about to tell them that they were there. It's a lot of weight. Then on the second to last day, we come and there's a little storm there, and there was a rainbow over building 18. I thought that was a divine sign of the treasures we were finding. That's in the parking lot there. So now we're heading into not building 24. I apologize. It's building 37. And that's where the other treasures are. And so we took a field trip over there to take a look. There are the crates. I looked up at one. It was the captain's wheel for the USS Maine. The Smithsonian loves to make crates. Everything's in a crate. So many treasures in there. And then they took us over to the cabinets that had the type collection. So here's the catalog that Morgan Press, a couple of their catalogs, these are the wood type ones, and they would send these out. These are extremely collectible. If you have one and you don't want it, send it to me. And all of that wood type is in these cabinets we're about to see. As well as a lot of the earlier matrices. It was an amazing experience to be able to see this material, which for the most part, nobody has looked at for probably a decade or two. This is literally, in my view, a tomb. I describe it as King Tut's typographic tomb. It was probably about 100 feet of cabinetry, 50 to 100 feet. Ian managed to find Canterbury, his favorite typeface. Unfortunately, it's in building 34, not building 18. Well, I'm going to work on trying to get this out of there. There's the crew. We probably have one more visit. I'm trying to wait as long as I can, because I need to find the space to put this in. Usually the question I get from everybody is, well, you're getting all this material, where are you going to put it? If you've been to the printing museum, it's not like we have about 15,000 square feet of space, but it's already filled. And we have storage containers and trailers filled up with stuff. And so I did just finish building an additional storage space in our storage facility. So we have a place to put it, but I'm waiting as long as I can. I think it's fine to have things sit at the Smithsonian as long as we can and all. So that's in process. None of that material really has moved our way except a few pieces we managed to pull out. The really odd part of this whole process is that you would really expect the Smithsonian to have a high level of protocol on getting rid of stuff. And it was kind of like, I asked him, so is there some paperwork or something? I said, oh, well, you can send us some paperwork and we'll sign it. It's like, wow, you spent $400,000 on this collection. And if we had said no to this, it's important to understand that the next option, they had already deaccessioned this entire collection. The next option was the dumpster or the scrap metal people. So we were that close to losing our typographical heritage. Had I not put the hand up and said, yes, it needs to be saved. We'll figure it out, but it needs to be saved. And it's important at this point to mention that the ability to do this is thanks to some really important benefactors and supporters. But the main one there is John and Robin Horn in Little Rock, Arkansas, who are dear friends of the Printing Museum. And when he heard that we were saving this collection, he was inspired and also angry at the Smithsonian for trashing our heritage as printers and having such disregard for it. So the good thing is they made an effort to find a new home for it. And we managed to make that connection, and it's going to be saved. And with Val's help, and as well as Bob Mullen, and Bob at Sterling Type Foundry, and we've talked with him. He's got the correct typecasting equipment. We're going to set up a revival typecasting project to actually revive many of those ATF matrices, the ones that we can actually cast from. So that will be very exciting to see that happen and all. So with that, let me bounce over to the Dave Peat project. And let me share the screen on this one. I apologize, we are getting to 7:48. So I'll try and go through this as quickly as I can. So the Dave Peat Collection is in Indianapolis. Here is Dave Peat. He started his press in 1960 and started collecting, thinking that there wouldn't be any of this material left. He was certainly surprised by how much he was able to find. Dave's background is not in printing. He is an engineer and worked for Western Electric and the telephone side. He has a couple patents with telephones and all. But on the side, he was an avid collector of many things. Fortunately, he was an avid collector of printing material, 19th century type specimen books, and printing presses. Just so you know how avid of a collector Dave was, he also collected other things like railroad cars and steam engines and spark plugs and antique fireworks, pyrotechnics. Dave collected lots of things, and but his real love was certainly in the printing. Some in the audience probably have visited Dave at his house. In the latter years, he really wouldn't let anybody into the house very far because there was so much clutter, and you were not able to even walk around the space in the collections. But his was a treasure trove, a real national treasure of type. And this particular book here was his very first type specimen book that he picked up. And when I opened up the cover and I found it inside the cabinet right behind the book right there, that little spot to the left, he marked in there my very first type specimen book from the Franklin Type Foundry in Cincinnati. And this beautiful book of fonts is what led him down this path. And eventually he had probably the largest private collection of type specimen books of the 19th century, about 350 of these volumes. And you're about to see about 4,000 fonts of Victorian and early 20th century type, 750 fonts of wood type, thousands upon thousands of cuts and wood engravings, doodads, tools, boxes, artifacts, 200 plus small printing presses. It just went on and on. And something to appreciate is that all of this went into his 3-bedroom, 2-bath house. Here will be a view of some of the type specimen books. This is a large wood type from Hamilton. Isn't that just amazing? Just beautiful books. Large type from Stymie that was actually cast. That's that wood type book. Mary, his wife, who did not want to be pictured, sitting behind there in her kitchen as I was getting the type books collected, just to give you a sense of the size of this type specimen book. There was an entire palette of these books. And Dave knew how to use the type as well. These were his inspirations. what will be fun is actually making all of this accessible to the various graphic artists and designers to come down to the museum. We got to figure out ways to do special events with this material. The goal here is not to move it into a tomb, but to make it come alive and be accessible and used. So we're now about to see the collection here. Now, something to keep in mind is I've tried to have some pictures here to show what this place looked like before we started cleaning it. Dave, when I came in there, and over the last number of years, every time I visited Dave, there was so much material and so much clutter. 10, 15, 20 years ago, Dave had lost control of the space. There was no floor visible. There was no horizontal space. Everything was packed upon everything. Everything was stacked, and you had a box on top of a box on top of a box all over the place. All of the type fonts, each of these is a unique font that's in there on its side in a specially designed cardboard box that could hold the weight. And he would build these cabinets, and he would hold it. So you've got about 2,500 to 3,000 of these boxes. And every inch of space was used to hold type. And Dave, every time he printed something, he would take a sample of it and print it on gummed paper and then attach it to the box. So Dave had about 200 small toy printing presses, which themselves are their own collection. The cabinet these ones are in is actually a turn of the century cigar cabinet, which we got so that we could display these again. Presses everywhere. Now, to many, all the presses look the same, but they're actually all very unique. And the challenge is we identify, photograph, and catalog all this material. So here's a view of Dave's shop when it was cleaned up. This took us about a week to get to this level so that we could actually see the green and tan floor, beautiful tiling. We could not walk around the entire shop here. But this gives you a sense of how everything was stacked upon everything. Every possible creation of horizontal space was then something was placed on top of it precariously. So you have in the middle here his beautiful Washington press from Cincinnati Type Founders. And he didn't have many big presses. Mostly he had small presses. Everything was stacked up to the ceiling. Every inch of space. So there's one of the small toy presses, and the box itself is as valuable as the press. And this was sold, these presses, if you're not aware, these were all sold or given away to kids in the late 19th, early 20th century, to help their moral development and give them something productive to do. Now you find these on eBay. Many of these presses in his collection are extremely rare. Those are all type specimen books. A pearl cutter known as the eagle cutter, very, very rare. So there's Dave and his wife, Mary, at an exhibit at the University of Indianapolis. And Catherine and her students did a lot of work helping in the latter years there to help organize part of the collection and get the type back into the cases and the boxes. And they had a wonderful exhibit detailing Dave's collection. And if you notice up there in the upper right, that's one of his annual projects, which is his calendar. So every year he would print a calendar on half-size sheets of paper, usually on both sides, multiple colors, using parts of the collection, and usually whatever he collected that year, those typefaces would make it onto those pages. And so he would be down there every night after work designing and creating these pages with the physical metal type, and then printing on his pearl printing press. He had a number 11 pearl press, which I'll have a picture here in a bit. And these calendars were his advertising. He would send these out to people all across the country, and he'd always be announcing that he's interested in collecting printing type and presses and wood type, or spark plugs, or pyrotechnics. Dave managed to get to 50 calendars. And those are the fonts, which helps us identify what's in the collection. Toy presses everywhere, type everywhere, stuff everywhere. I had the chance to actually print in Dave's printing shop, which was a little frustrating because it's like Dave has everything and Dave has nothing. You can't find any of the spacing material or any of the things you need to get your form set up, but it's all there somewhere. And Dave loved boxes, cigar boxes, big boxes, tools. Up there on the wall are the pulls. That's where his first type specimen book was found. One of my other helpers there is Joe Fazio, came out from Southern California, and Joe's a master at packing things. And he was out there for 3 different weeks. It took us 4 full weeks with a team of 2 to 3 people to bring all this material out of the house. It turned out to be 2 53-foot semi-truckloads of material, all in a 3-bedroom, 2-bath house. Treasures everywhere. This is actually in the garage. One of Dave's early forms that he never put the type away. So that's an original mortised engraving, electrotype border design, and then he would put his type in there. Of course, Dave, because it was all of his own stuff, sometimes he just never put anything away. And if you set type using the metal type, eventually you run out of E's or A's or something else. You will be out of sorts, is the phrase, that you're out of the extra characters. And so one of our really steep challenges is getting all of this type back to the font, back into the case of the box. If you remember the look of that space, Joe Fazio took a lot of pride when he was able to clear it out. Paper cutter on the right, in the middle is a very rare platen press known as a globe. And the red wheel on the left is a rare paper cutter known as a paper plow. There's the globe printing press from Cincinnati Type Founders. What it took to move all this material, the heavy machines, out of this space. Ed Reagan, there in Indiana, we literally, to get this press out, which was exactly the height of the door, and this was a frozen day in February. There was ice on the ground. We were at 30 degrees. So Ed, the master machinery mover, hooked up his come along with 2 pulleys to go around a curve, and we yanked out the press. And you can't really see it, but at the feet of the press, there's metal trays called galleys, and we literally scooted it 1 inch at a time and pulled it out because we couldn't get a forklift or anything else out down there, and the press was too tall. There it's coming out. We got it up to the side of the house and we were able to pick it up. One of my favorite shots of Dave using a box, yet again, that he loved. He would find any box. And nothing better than a bunch of wood type in a chocolate heart-shaped box. Who would not want to receive that on Valentine's Day? That's marketing genius right there. And Dave collected the tools and the artifacts, all this stuff that represents printing history. The boxes. This is bookend weights cast by BB&S and given away to their customers with Ben Franklin. Looking wonderful. You might not know what that is, but that's actually for cutting that shape out of paper. Paper version of a printing press. Very rare, low printing press from the Civil War. Dave had several sizes of this. On the right there, a copy press from the mid-19th century. There's a series of his presses. Now there's Dave at his Pearl press. Dave's not flipping you off, just so you know. The picture there is to actually show that Dave, this press has over 1 million impressions on it. Every sheet of paper that went in there, he probably printed 2 or 3 colors on it. On all of his calendars, all of those pages, Dave printed literally over 1 million impressions on this press. And he knew the press so well that when it was operating with the motor, Dave could feed the press. And by the end of his life, Dave had macular degeneration. Dave was legally blind. He could not see, and yet he was still printing on his press. I do not recommend that. But here he was printing one last item on there on one of my last visits. By the way, so here is the iconic bathroom next to his shop. Everybody would line up when they visit his house to go in and sit in this bathroom. And all the walls were filled with typographical and printing treasures and bookbinding. Those are roulettes on the right side there. Wood type compositing sticks on the left. Small printing presses over you. Morgan Type Collection there to peruse with the big letter M. You'd be in here for a half hour to 45 minutes at least, just enjoying everything that was there. We are going to recreate that bathroom at the International Printing Museum in our Book Arts lab. So when you guys come down there, you'll be able to experience all of that. Oh, on the left there, you can also see he had the wooden patterns from the Kelsey Press Manufacturing Company. And they were on the walls. Just great period boxes. He had paper, loved, and ephemeral material all over the place. There's the cigar box, wood type borders, wood type everywhere. We just kept in the garage. We kept finding more and more wood type that I'm convinced Dave hadn't seen for 20 years. This is just the stuff in the garage. And Dave was great about identifying who he got the collections from, who he bought it from. So here's from Bill McGarry, 1997. And so we have in Dave's collection, while I was pulling the collection together and boxing it up, I kept coming across all these people that I've known and people that I've never met that have been a part of printing history and type history and the hobby of printing and collecting this material. Their names, their letters, their photos, all of this was a part of Dave's world. Many of the people in the audience here, you were in Dave's house and I came across you. I even came across a young photo of me with Dave. And we would find treasures inside cabinets. You just open up a drawer and there's something you didn't expect. And this kept going on every time we were there. We were never disappointed by finding something. So much material. Look how tight the aisles are. Kevin Bradley from the Church of Type out here in Los Angeles. Now he's with Voodoo Rocket. They're in Greenville, Tennessee. He came up for 2 weeks and helped me out. And Kevin does large letterpress printing, but also likes to work with the small type. So he was getting some of the 6-point type that was pied and has actually sorted it, organized it, and has already been printing from it. This space right here is even the basement, the last place we approached, and so much material in the basement. That used to be a family room. Those doors were covered by wood type cabinets since 1968. And when we cleaned out the space to get the presses out, I was able to take Mary, the widow. She actually got to walk through those doors for the first time since about 1968. I said, when was the last time you came through here? She said that was that year. And that's out into the garden area. And Mary's job was to make sure that there was something sweet for us to eat. She wouldn't let us walk by the kitchen. And I think all of us gained 2, 3, 4 pounds. And we just wanted to make sure Mary felt good. And we'd keep taking one treat at a time. But she would never let the plate go empty. Mary had been with Dave all these years in all the collecting. Going to all these places, going into all the chicken coops, finding the type. So this is Dave's garage, which was packed all the way up to the doors with no way to walk anywhere in there except narrow alleys. And I had to unload the garage several times. We get it out, all the boxes. Dave loved boxes. There was never a box Dave didn't love. And all different sizes and shapes, and which makes it really hard to store things in an organized way. We would get it all out, try and sort it, palletize it, do the stuff with it. And then, by the end of the day or the trip, we have to pull things back in, and then we have to do it again. It comes back out. We cleaned the garage 4 or 5 times. My favorite sign was the one that Mary was holding there. And I don't think he ever followed that direction. The edge of the garage, looking in, there was so much material in there. That's on another time of having to pull things out. And I'm trying to, as a curator in me is trying to sort through the papers and save what need to be saved. And in the middle of a box of medical papers and bank stuff will be something from 1880 from Kelsey Company, or a important correspondence from Type Foundry or something. And you kept losing time trying to sort through the boxes because the dumpster was right behind me on this photo. And the son, Brian, who's the executor, who's my age, they were just getting ready to throw everything into the dumpster to help make space. So I've taken a lot of those boxes back to the museum. There's a whole career just going through the boxes. That's a clean garage, by the way. There's the dumpster on its way out with one of the loads. This photo of Dave's Washington press. So in the middle of one of the early weeks, down in the basement where you could not see the floor, there was a 1/4 inch to a 1/2 inch of paper all over the floor. And we've been walking over it. At some point, Brian walks up, Brian Peat, the son, walks up, and he shows me this photo that we've been walking over on the floor. It's a photo of Brian Peat, Dave's son, in 1969, sitting next to his father's Washington press. And Brian told me the story of how his dad made him the honorary printer's devil. And that sounded like such an exciting title to a young boy. And after 6 months to a year of doing the duties of a printer's devil, Brian said he began to realize what this meant, which was, I have to do everything you tell me to do, and I have to pick up all the type that you drop on the ground, and I have to organize it all. This is not very fun. But that photo was sitting on the ground, and I'm so thankful that it got saved. So I told Brian, we need to reshoot that picture. And there he is, looking at the press that it's been there, with the family this entire time. He still does not want to be the printer's devil. Dave was so into the history of all this and thought everybody else would certainly love it. They all helped him with his calendar every year. They all took the trips to go to all these printing places, all of his conferences for printing, moving the equipment. Brian had to move all this stuff. They were like, well, I think we're done with the collection here. So tools and wonderful artifacts everywhere. Kevin Bradley helping with the type, getting it packed up, finding treasures. He's already working with some of the type on loan. There's Dave's Pearl Press. We actually took that over to University of Indianapolis. So Catherine and her students are setting up a special exhibit there. It'll be on loan to them. And Dave would find, like, this is paper that he found, and then he imprinted his information on the right side. And he'd have so many versions of him looking for type or books or something. He had a way of finding vintage paper and then making use of it. Printers, rulers from all the different printing companies, typographic material like a stencil machine. Gotta love the name of that book, Swine Breeder's Journal. But you gotta save it, it's gotta be a swine breeder out there who's looking for that. Photos of also, he started the Railroad Museum in Indianapolis. That's the wood type aisle in the garage. That's what most of the floors look like, where you can't even get in there. 3 or 4 tall cabinets of wood type, just packed in. Tools everywhere. And very important tools, very special tools, and very generic stuff as well. So Mary's specialty is in the garden with her plants and everything else. So I just love this photo when we pulled all these printing presses out of a dilapidated shed in the yard that was filled with raccoons. And there was still wood type in there and printing presses. These printing presses were all in there. So those are part of Mary's garden, at least for that moment. So we brought them home. Mary's such a delightful soul. This was actually the last piece that I worked on with Dave, and we printed this for the Printers Ways Goose at the Printing Museum for the APA, the Amalgamated Printers Association. And so we did this as a joint project, and tremendous amount of pleasure on my part to be able to do this project with Dave, with his type on his press. Very frustrating because you couldn't find anything that could make the press work and get the ink and everything else. He didn't have one ink knife in the place, I think. He always used popsicle sticks. Printed there by Rich Hopkins, one of our other friends. So Dave was everywhere in his shop. Apologize, we already saw it. There's the winch with pulleys, pulling it out. Kevin and Joe at the truck. So that entire collection there, I can get back to my screen. Give me 1 second. There we go. Okay, I'm back. So we have now the entirety of Dave Peat's collection is now at the printing museum in our storage facility. And we're slowly trying to create both a permanent exhibit for Dave, as well as make the type, get it cataloged and make that, the type and the books and everything else accessible and stuff. It's a lifetime's work. So should you ever want to come out and help with that, we will have some work projects of sorting Dave's type and organizing and stuff. It's a chance to be among the treasures of type history and all. So it's very, very fortunate that we've been in a place to actually save both of these typographic collections. It's amazing that this all happened within the same year or two of each other. It's an important work that we're doing to preserve our heritage, but to preserve it in a way that doesn't shove it into a tomb. The goal here is not to have all this stuff locked away forever, but to make sure that it is accessible and can be used to once again create amazing works of art, to give us an appreciation of our typographical heritage and that. So with that, I apologize for going so late here. We're at 20 minutes after. So I'll turn it over to the host and she can, if there's any questions you guys have. By the way, I do have 2 videos, both of when they first walked through the collection and of my time of walking Mary Peat through the collection for the first time after we cleaned it up. We didn't want to show it tonight because there really isn't enough time. But if you check on the museum's YouTube channel, they should be up there. If you can't find it, please connect with me at the Printing Museum at mark@printmuseum.org, and I will send you those links. And if you can't get a question in tonight, feel free to ask me directly.
Mark, there were a lot of questions about how the moving is going to happen from the Smithsonian. Will you just contract that with a mover, or how tightly do you oversee that kind of move?
I will be very involved with it. Ian Edelson, who's I think in our group here tonight. Ian is a logistics guy, as I mentioned, and he's got all the contacts with the trucking companies. So we are palletizing everything, and it's almost ready now for the next visit. We will load up. It'll probably, because of the weight, not the volume, the weight will require 2 or 3 semi truckloads. Plus I have all the cabinetry, all this oak cabinetry, which I just can't leave that there. I'm not sure how much of it we can use, but we need to get it saved and back into the hands of others. So if that comes of possibility, you need to let me know if you'd like an ATF type cabinet with small, thin drawers, useful for about 20 sheets of paper. So.
Well, that was really a fabulous set of photos, and amazing collections that you've been going through. I'll just throw this open if anybody has any questions that they have a burning need to know now. So we will put the links that Mark mentioned on our website as well, so that you can follow up on seeing this video and the ones that he mentioned. And hopefully we will all be able to take a trip down to Los Angeles to go to the museum. Oh, I was going to ask, when is the museum open generally, Mark? Is it open every day, or?
We're always open on Saturdays to the general public and by appointment during the week, which means if you're ever coming down to Los Angeles and it's not going to be on a Saturday, you just shoot me a note, an email, or a text or something. And we're in the city of Carson, the culturally significant city of Carson, between Long Beach and Los Angeles. And it is a working collection. Great place to show up at. And if you have guests with you, just don't tell them where you're taking them. Let them be surprised, because nobody knows what a printing museum is and why they would want to go there. But we do love to make history come alive. And as you can probably tell, I am extremely passionate about this material. I love it. And I love talking about it and sharing it, and from the small presses, the big presses, everything on that. And if you want to come down and actually work with the type, that's one of the other goals that we have here, is to get to the point where we can have some studio time where those who are qualified to work with the type can actually come in and work with the Morgan type, the Dave Peat collection, the museum's existing collection of wood and metal type. We also have the Dave Norton collection. This edition, these two alone, it's about an additional 6,500 fonts of Victorian metal type. And we have the Dave Norton collection, which is another 1,500 fonts. So we're a little crazy. Yeah, it's a little nuts, but the joy is actually seeing it get used. So just like Kevin Bradley just showed me some of the stuff he's just been creating. If you go to Voodoo Rocket and check him out on his Facebook page, you can see some of the stuff he's been creating with the type. Beautiful, beautiful stuff. And who wants to work with 6-point type? He's actually sorted stuff that had fallen and pied. I can't even see the stuff anymore. I got to wear these things that I still can't see it. So that's, we're gonna, within the next few years, we're gonna have the ability for people to come with advanced arrangement and maybe come down and spend a few days to a week and working with it and creating your own unique works of art using the collection. We have a new book arts lab there at the museum, the Book Arts Institute. So we've been teaching classes, and this material will be a part of it. The valuable stuff will be under certainly more control, but we want to see it used. We don't want it to be isolated away from everybody.
Mark,
That's fantastic. That's really fantastic.
Any other questions?
Mark,
Lindsay asked, oh, go ahead.
this is Bonnie Thompson Norman. I remember Ernie Lindner.
Yes.
I worked with Patrick Ray, and
Yes.
when Pat had his shop in Glendale, and Ernie had a shop across the street, and
Yes.
he would come by in his iconic overalls, and he'd talk about hot air ballooning and miniature cars, and just he was a kick. He was
Yeah.
just amazing.
Ernie was like Dave. I mean, these are iconic collector types, this personality. And maybe I'm in that pathway as well. It'd be certainly an honor. But Ernie, I always describe, he was a big German fellow with rosy cheeks and a handlebar mustache. And he lived
Always
life.
wore overalls. Always wore
And he had
overalls.
classic overalls that I always asked him about that, why he wore these one piece. It's not even, it's really a jumpsuit is what he had.
Right.
He says, well, they were comfortable because he had a big chest and all. And yep.
Lindsay asked if you had a favorite thing that you moved to the museum.
Oh, wow.
Good question, Lindsay.
Yeah, the problem is that what's your favorite thing this hour is then the next hour it's something else. And the photo that was on the website page with the that font from the Morgan collection with the curly cues and
Houghton, I think it was.
yeah, Houghton. Yeah, Houghton. I was like, I'm just in love with that font. I mean, just I can sit there and stare at it all night and just have a wonderful evening and sip a little wine and it's been a perfect night. And then maybe the next night I'll use her and then we'll print something, but it's just great. And so in Dave's stuff, the same thing. I mean, going through his type specimen books, when I discovered the first book that he collected, it was in that special spot on his way out the shop, and the rest of the bathroom was on the right after you walked out of there. And I didn't realize it was there. He had never showed it to me. And discovering that and then opening it up was an amazing moment. It's like, wow, it's just to be the one to help curate and deal with Dave's collection. I mean, if you look at that insanity of the mess, it's on one side, it's absolutely amazing. On the other side, it's completely terrifying. As a curator of printing history, this was like, Dave, these are the sins of a collector.
Yeah, it's amazing you got through those collections.
because the family, the answer the family has with your collection is that green dumpster. It's like the Smithsonian higher bureaucracy. The fastest decision to be made, the easiest one, is to say, get rid of it. And what it takes to go through all those boxes and all that stuff. And I'm so passionate about it. It's like, I will go through every one of his boxes. I mean, I'd go through these boxes of paper that in the basement that were just like, oh my Lord, and it's just junk. And then you're ready to send it to the dumpster. And then all of a sudden you come across a rare piece of paperwork and it's like, shoot, now I got to take this box back to California and I got to find some time and I don't have time, but I'll have to find the time and I'll go through it and pull all that together. So a lesson here in going through Dave's stuff and even the Smithsonian is we have to all remember we're temporary keepers of the things that we hold. We're only caretakers, and it goes somewhere. And there's so many in the audience here who have collections, is that you are not done as a collector until you find the next home for your material. And on Dave, he left it to the family, so he didn't make a decision before he died. So that's a risky thing to do. And had somebody else gone in there to deal with this, they wouldn't have dealt with the small stuff. They would have dealt with the books and the type and the wood type and maybe the printing presses, and all that other stuff would have been tossed. The family certainly would have tossed it because they need the space back. So it's a lesson for all of us. It's a lesson for me as a collector, as a curator of a museum. We've got 18 semi-trailers full of stuff. I have to go through that and make decisions because I don't need a bureaucrat past me to make a bad decision. I have to make the right decision at this point. So remember that with all of your material there is take the effort to figure out where it's going to go. All of us have something that's probably fairly important, fairly worth saving. Make sure that family and other key people know what to do with your stuff and give them the names, give them the contacts, talk about it. Even if you don't make the decision to get rid of it yet, make sure you make those plans because the midnight hour is the worst hour. It is so risky. All of this could have been lost, but it's not been saved.
And
So-
that's so exciting. I think that's a great note to end on is let's all take a lesson there that we have responsibility to the future of our collections. And I want to thank you, Mark, for a fabulous presentation. That was really as good as I was hoping, because I really wanted to hear about the details and great photos and great stories about it. So thank you very much for sharing that with us. And with that, since we're pressing on into the second hour, I think we'll wrap it up. If you have more, please don't hesitate to contact Mark. I'll make sure that his email address is on the Book Arts Guild website, and he's easy to find at the International Printing Museum because I found him when I wanted to say, Mark, please come give us a talk. So thank you for your time, and thanks for pulling all that together.
Sure. And our website is printmuseum.org. And one of the drop-down menus goes to our YouTube video playlist. And if you're in the audience and you have not experienced a tour of printing history in the collections, I've done a 4-part tour on there. You can find that on YouTube and get the Cook's talk about from Gutenberg and before, working the presses and linotypes and everything else like that. So make use of that to share that. And if you're an instructor, those are good resources for your students. Thank you,
Great.
everybody.
Thank you.